type of practice. Now, some coaches go too far, and in my opinion, that is the abuse of a rites of passage situation. The same thing applies to Greek letter organizations, other fraternities, all these different organizations. The same thing, in my opinion, applies to where individuals sometimes take things too far, and that's what becomes my definition of hazing, to where we all, whether we realize it or not, go through certain types of rites of passage or initiations, but it's to build a bond, it's to make people stronger. Singing in a choir could be a rites of passage when certain people have to over and over again hit a certain part that the choir director takes. Now, as Jaleesa said, they can say, no, I'm not going to do it anymore. I felt I did it right at the first time. However, they do it because they're a part of a whole system to, again, progress them from one status to another. And I hate to be a little long-winded, but I'm so passionate about this issue that you bring up because it's very important, because what we have now are individuals who are taking things too far, and it becomes hazing and not really understanding the historical perspective and the original intent of what a rites of passage is. But this is a great topic, and I hope all of you listeners are really tuned into this program, because Ed Moore is getting deep tonight.
And like I said, this is a very historical night for the university. Nothing of this nature has ever been done here, and now so whether it will ever be done again, only time will tell.
The viewers will make sure that happens again.
Mr. Selassie, I just want to know, when you were pledging in your fraternity, were any violent acts done to you? And if so, how did it make you feel?
Okay. Well, first of all, I specifically want to say that my personal fraternity, which I won't mention, is a non-pledging, non-hazing organization. Mm-hmm. It specifically states, if you go on our website, which I'm not going to mention the website, that we have a zero tolerance policy for hazing and things of that nature. At the same time, the process that I went through, the rites of passage, and that's the beauty of a fraternity, going back to the University of Alabama, going back to whatever, choir or whatever, it's different sects, in my opinion, of organizations that do things a certain way and have rituals that are specific to those people who are initiates. So from the outside looking in, it's they're getting their butt whooped, or they're getting 500 pieces of wood or paddles for you an audience that doesn't understand that vernacular, but they're getting so many amounts of the type of abuse that happens to them, when in actuality, unless you are a member of that organization, unless you have went through that type of rites of passage, you never really know. So again, just in answering your question, based upon what I personally went through, I went through a ritual, I went through a rites of passage, and nothing in my experience, thank God, because again, there are individuals, you see the FAMU case, you see all these cases around the country where individual members take things too far. At the same time, from my personal experience, it was a wonderful life-changing and eye-opening experience, upon which I was able to bring more of me to the fraternity, as opposed to the fraternity making me by beating me down, humiliating me, or anything else like that. There is really a serious process, and even if anybody would go up and look up rites of passage on a Wikipedia or in any type of dictionary, it says that it's a universal phenomenon. So not only in America are we seeing rites of passage ceremonies, the Aborigines in Australia, tribes in West Africa, there are so many places throughout the world and the universe that participate in rites of passage ceremonies that don't necessarily get to humiliating and killing an individual based upon certain individual acts of particular members. So again, great question, but I cannot attest to going through anything that humiliated me and made me feel like less of a man.
Mr. Ryan Mobley, who is he was a former airman. For anyone who doesn't know what that means, it just means he was in the Air Force, and he's a current student of Marion Military Institute in Marion, Alabama. As a former member of the armed forces, Ryan, I know hazing goes on in there as well. Can you just kind of tell me what kind of violent hazing acts go on as far as the military or the armed forces is concerned?
Well, in terms of violent acts in armed forces, there aren't really any incidents between the drill sergeant and the trainee. The violent incidents that actually go on are the trainees themselves. When you are in training, you always run into that someone, they call it, that can't get right.
That can't get right.
That never masters that part of training, can never get in step, can't do a push-up, can't run a mile. So what do? The other trainees correct them. Whereas some may catch them while they're in the shower, some may catch them while they're asleep. There's a wide range of ways in which they try to correct them, but the worst forms of hazing in the military comes from the trainees themselves.
So let's just say a new person is coming to the school. What do you call them? You say you call them cadets? Yes. Is that what they're called? A new cadet comes into the school. Let's just say if I'm a new cadet, yes. Okay, and I just can't get it right. I can't do push-ups. Lord knows I don't exercise like I need to. I can't do push-ups. I can't run a lap. Can't do anything. So what are my fellow cadet brothers, or whatever the term is that you give those people who you associate with at the institute, what are some of the possible things that they could do to me?
Well, at Marion Military Institute, each new cadet goes through a cycle. It's called an ITC cycle, intense training cycle. They have to go through 4 weeks of learning how to drill, like all the basic drills, basic PT, all that. So by the time you get through this cycle, you will know all of the basics. And some of the cadets are like not only just basic cadets, they have no military obligation. There are also some that are going to West Point Academy, Naval Academy.
West Point is in New York, by the way.
Air Force Academy in Colorado. And so everyone that comes in knows what they're getting themselves into.
See, I'm sorry, every time I hear their part, and that's nothing against you necessarily, but every time I hear they know what they're getting themselves into, that really, to put it plainly, upsets me. Just because I just don't. When somebody says they know what they're getting into, to me that says that the person who is saying that doesn't care that something bad happened to this individual. Like when I mentioned the Robert Champion case at Florida AMU, I had a lot of people say, well, he should have known what he was getting into. And to me, that's asinine, because I said to myself, okay, what would have happened if that was your brother? What would have happened if that were your child? What were to happen if that was your best friend? What would you feel if that were to happen to your cousin? I don't think people's responses would necessarily be the same. And so that's why when I hear people say things like that comes across to me as a little ignorant and nonchalant. And so that's why, like I said, there's nothing necessarily against you, but when I hear that, sometimes it just kind of makes me cringe. And because I know if something like that were to happen to me, I'm sure my close friends would not be saying, oh, well, Ed knew what he was getting into. No, the first thing that will come into their head is, oh my God, Ed is dead.
Ed, can I say something on that?
Please do.
You're very right. You are so very right, and logically speaking, like you said, if something like that happened to my brother, my sister, my uncle, my aunt, I would be devastated. I would be pissed off, and I would get to the point to where I would want to possibly retaliate against someone as well. And one thing I think that we have to keep in mind in this whole conversation, when you talk about that a person knew what they were getting themselves into, that's like a female going to a house party and she mess around and get raped. Now, well, she knew what she was getting into. That is ignorance. And what we
that
have
man
to do,
had no business putting his hands on her.
Exactly. Domestic violence, all of these different things. We have to hold people, individuals, accountable for the actions that they do. And it's no different in fraternal organizations, the military, or anything else. I mean, the numerous, even there was even rumors about, in the case of FAMU, and I don't know, all of the investigation is still ongoing, but there are rumors that this young man was intentionally hazed even more, allegedly, because he was homosexual. Well, that's wrong. That's basic discrimination. That's utterly wrong on so many different levels. And that's what I want different fraternity members and people who haven't even joined yet. The whole purpose, again, going back to a rites of passage, one should not know what they're getting into, but it should not be a process of pain, destruction, and hurt, and just an empty feeling for families who have to then bury a member of their family because of some ignorant mistake by certain individuals. And again, I'm just so passionate about this issue, but I completely agree with you, brother. It's not, it shouldn't be just written off as, oh, well, they knew what they were getting into.
No, it shouldn't.
I'm through. I'm sorry.
It shouldn't. Mr. David E. Reddick, who is the Calhoun County NAACP chapter president. Hello, Mr. Reddick. How you doing?
Hey, how you doing, Mr. Ed Moore?
Mr. Reddick, by the way, is also a former member of the Navy, and I guess I want to know, looking back on those days as a much older adult, how do you feel about those kind of violent hazing acts now?
I'd like to take a chance to say thank you for bringing me on the show.
You're more than welcome.
This panel of people is a phenomenal vibe that we have when we're communicating and everything. And you guys, I think y'all gonna really see that in the show later on. But you have to look at it like, I'm gonna go with what Sayron said. It's a rite of passage, you know. And in many cultures, that rite of passage happens, and it's not because, you know, let's have some fun with the new person that's coming in. It's because it's important. You got to look at the Marines, the Navy, things like that. Boot camp. Can I break down boot camp?
Go ahead.
My psychological stance of what basic training is the first thing that happens to you when you show up at basic training is they take you and they put you in a room. You don't know where you are or what's going on. They keep you up for probably 2 days. They keep you up until everybody in that room is exhausted. They don't let anybody sleep, and they don't tell anybody what's going on. And what they do after they do that, they process you, and then they cut all your hair off. They cut, you know, they take any individual identifying marker away from you. So they basically take your personality, and then they put you in the same outfit, the same uniform. You don't even get a name. We spent our first week in what we call the Smurf outfit. I was in the Navy. So when you're in Smurfs, all you have is something that say Navy across your chest, and you don't even get a name. You're not called by your name. You called recruit, and that's all you are. And through this process, they're basically breaking down that old person, that individual, that person that talked back to their parents, that person that exercised when they wanted to, and they put you in a situation where you're being programmed to fold your clothes a certain way, make your bed a certain way. They're programming you, and once they tear you down, what they do is they introduce this new programming or this new life into you and rebuild you with now your name is you become Seaman. You know, I was Seaman Reddick, and that was my name, and I became Seaman Reddick, and I learned my UCMJ, my Uniform Code of Military Justice. I learned all the rules and regulations to the Navy. I learned what was right and what was wrong, and I became this new individual. So the person I was when I went in basic training wasn't the person I was when I left basic training. And it was a situation, and it was a process that was heavily watched. I had division commanders, and they had bosses, and their bosses had bosses. And you did have, you know, eventually people passed out, people got hurt through the process. It wasn't intentional, and you didn't go to basic training to get hurt, but it happened. But the process was to create this bond or this person, and your identity changes. That's really what, you know, we call it hazing, but that's the process. That's the rite of passage that you go through to become that person. And, you know, that's a process that we go through that brings us into becoming that person we are. So it's a process, and when it's watched over properly, it's good. And if I can say one thing, I think the big mistake they made was making it illegal. They call it hazing.
Making what illegal?
What we consider hazing, but not the hazing itself, but the process. Because what that does is it takes your advisor, it takes your administrators, and puts them in a position where they can't oversee this process. So now you got somebody that just got out through the organization last year, and they're bringing somebody else through this year, and they don't understand why